Hello. Sir, can you hear me online?
I can hear you.
Namo Namah Sarvebhya. Good evening to one and all present here. It is a privilege to welcome all of you to what promises to be an enlightening session as we embark on this guest lecture organized by the Center for Indian Knowledge Systems, IIT Roorkee. I would like to welcome Professor Soham Chakrabarti to kindly share a few words about the center. He has been the driving force behind today's events. Sir, please come on stage and share a few words.
Thank you, Pradun. I just want to say that well, our center is very new, so just introducing the center to all of you who may not be aware. Our center is very new. It's Center for Indian Knowledge Systems, and here we are striving to bring bring up the knowledge that is there in our Indian tradition. There are a lot of, as you know, there are a lot of shastras and other texts which are there in philosophy, economics, in science, in engineering as well, in architecture. So there are many different sort of ideas were generated, and we are trying to recover them. And one of the primary ideas and concepts, which is very, I can say it's like a paradigm shift from the other thought processes in the world, is the idea of consciousness being the primary source of everything, and that idea is very unique to our culture, to India. And here we have gathered in order to get an overview of all the different approaches that are being taken over the world to understand what consciousness is. And Dr. Anish will give you a very good idea on that, what the Western philosophers and scientists are thinking about consciousness, how the Indian knowledge system has thought about consciousness. So I welcome Dr. Anish on behalf of the Center for Indian Knowledge System to share us with this very interesting topic. And I hope this will arouse curiosity in your minds, and also you will be taking up, if not professionally, but at least with deep passion and interest, the search for consciousness and its studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahoday, for your encouraging words and for spearheading such a visionary initiative. Now, without further ado, let us begin the talk we are all eagerly waiting for. I would like to begin by introducing our esteemed guest speaker, Dr. Anish Rakheja. Dr. Rakheja is a visionary founder behind Krescon Coaches, a pioneering force in India's executive and leadership coaching realm. With a background in top-tier education like IIT Roorkee and IIM Mumbai, an extensive corporate experience spanning over 3 decades, Dr. Anish recognized the transformative potential of coaching early on. Though involved in coaching and mentoring for over a decade, he formally launched the Krescon movement in 2019, driven by a mission to empower individuals to embark on their own personal journeys of self-awareness. A Jyotish Acharya, author, and avid student of the global consciousness models, Dr. Anish's personal philosophy and thinking are deeply rooted in the Sanskrit concept of Purnam. He is currently committed to his purpose of making the world aware of Indian wisdom through the Krescon I.CAN retreats, which are conducted globally and are unforgettable experience for the participants in their quest for self-discovery and impactful living. We welcome you, sir. Kindly proceed with the lecture. The floor is all yours.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. And thank you, Professor Soham, Dr. Anil Gorichetti, IKS, and most of all, thanks to my audience for being here today. I just recall the first time that I gave a talk on consciousness. That was a few years back. And coincidentally, it happened during Navratri. The first time that I gave a talk, I was invited at a place, and when I reached there, I saw a lot of cars being standing outside. So I was very happy. There's going to be a huge crowd. And obviously, any speaker would love to have a lot of audience. And when I entered the hall, there were just 4 people who were sitting there. Now, I was surprised because outside, itni sari karein khadi hui hain. I thought it's going to be a huge crowd. So I asked the organizer, what happened? Where are the people? But I see so many cars outside, but there are just very few participants out here. So कहते हैं कि ये जी बगल में जगराता चल रहा है माता का, so all the crowd is actually there. So a huge gratitude to my listeners that you all are here to listen about consciousness. So what's going to happen is I'm going to speak for around 45 minutes or so, and then we're going to have a Q&A. Now, to speak in 45 minutes about the universe of consciousness, it's a tall order. Normally, I hold a 3 days of an interaction just for a bird's eye view on what's happening globally in the consciousness studies. So today, it's actually going to be like a satellite view. And being such a high level view, it's very easy to lose your bearings on what's being presented. So my request is, do follow what's being presented and note down your questions. After 45 minutes, any thoughts, questions that you have, I'll be more than happy to take them. You know, normally in a presentation, like on a subject of consciousness, I have seen 4 stages normally happening. The first stage is where both the speaker and the audience, they understand what's being said. That's the start. Very slowly, the shift happens, and then you have the speaker and a very small group of audience who still understand what's being said. Then comes the third stage. The third stage is it's only the speaker who understands what's being said, and nobody from the audience is understanding what's going on. And finally, the fourth stage comes in when the speaker also does not understand what he or she is saying. And this is very easy. It can happen when we talk about consciousness. But today, you are in for a treat. Since I'm going to condense this presentation on consciousness in less than an hour, I'm going to be using very broad strokes today. So instead of going deep into a metaphysics of a particular approach, I'm just going to give you a very high level, as I said, the satellite level overview of what's really happening in the world of consciousness, in the study of consciousness. Now, since I'm going to use some broad strokes out here, I'm also going to leverage multiple sources to just give you the flavor in the consciousness studies. So the 3 references, prime references that I'm going to use today, the first one is a recent publication called A Landscape of Consciousness Towards a Taxonomy of Explanation. Now, this is done by a gentleman called Robert Lawrence Kuhn. Now, he's an interesting guy. He's a pass out of MIT, multimillionaire, investment banker, editor, TV producer, and he's also the creator of the PBS series Closer to Truth. Now, this is one of the finest series that I have come across, and he takes in different topics in the series. So if you guys haven't watched it, I would strongly recommend watch Closer to Truth. Now, this publication, Landscape of Consciousness, it's available on the public domain. You can download it, and it's worth a read. The second source that I'm going to use is a book by John Searle called The Theory of Consciousness. John Searle, again, is a very big name in the field of consciousness. He was the Mills Professor of Philosophy at UC Berkeley. And one of the very popular thought experiment, the Chinese room, was given by John Searle. The third reference is going to be, again, a book called the Why Does the Word Exist? An existential detective story. Now, this is by Jim Holt, who's a contributor to the New York Times. Now, the title is Why Does the Word Exist? Not how it exists. That's where most of the work is done, but why exactly the word exists. And obviously, a lot of my own learnings, introspections, being an eternal student of consciousness, So there's a lot gonna be there. So sit back, relax, grab a popcorn, Coke, coffee, whatever you have, and let's start this voyage. Now, the moment we start this journey, the first question we encounter, what's actually causing this major interest in the field of consciousness study? You know, at one time, no neurobiologist, physicist, mathematician would touch consciousness as the field because it was supposed to be a career destroyer. So what has changed? That today you have Nobel laureates, you have the top physicists, biologists, neurobiologists, cognitive scientists, mathematician, philosophers, everybody entering into the field of consciousness. So what's really changed? Even if you look at, do a Google search, look at the different announcement notifications on the different forums, conferences, symposiums, and you would invariably find some discussions on consciousness going on. तो पहला तो क्वेश्चन ये है क्यों? Why this interest? You know, yesterday I was sitting with an AI expert. She's an AI specialist, holds a PhD in AI, and she's one of the few women in this field, in the field of AI. And the discussion happened that can AI be conscious? Again, one of the heated discussions that's going on. And obviously it finally culminated, we reached some crazy thought. I'll share that with you very soon. And it was actually a bit scary. It was the goosebumps really came up where we actually ended the conversation. A lot of heated discussion that happened last evening. So now let's come back and what is the reason for this sudden surge? Why this interest? So I'm going to list down, share with you some of the possibilities. Now, this is not a complete list, but that can give us some of the flavor here. The first is the advances in the biomedical technology, the imaging technique. You have the fMRIs coming in, EEGs coming in. So they start questioning the concept of soul more vigorously. Atma. So if there is Atma, can I see it? So few decades back, if you ask any of the believer that, okay, can we see the soul? The answer was normally given, you can't because we don't have the techniques, the imaging techniques. Now today we have very sophisticated techniques. So this question came back, what about this Atma? Can we actually see this? There's a lot of loaded statements here. We'll again come to this a bit later. That's one reason, the advances in the biomedical technology. The second is we've been stuck with this thing about consciousness, that what is consciousness? For centuries, we've been stuck. Maybe time has finally come to actually trying to figure out what this consciousness is. You know, before consciousness, the biggest problem that was envisaged globally was how to explain life. Today, the different life processes have been mapped out. So though there's still controversial, have we explained the life completely or not, because consciousness is still not explained. But still, there was this like to quite an extent, we understand about life today. So maybe consciousness is like that final frontier. It's time for the men to go there to that frontier. Calamities like COVID has forced us to think deeply about our existence. Who am I? And finally, the artificial intelligence. The way the development progress is happening in AI, this has renewed the interest on a very immediate question, can AI be conscious? So that has really brought back consciousness onto the forefront. And today, as I said, that this is one of the most discussed area across the globe. Now, what is consciousness? Lots of debate. To describe consciousness itself, it's a problem. So what I'm going to share with you, as I said, it's a very broad stroke. So I'm going to give you two type of definitions which are currently prevalent in the field of consciousness studies. The first one defines consciousness in terms of the behavioral properties. The role that consciousness play in the operations of mind, brain, intelligence, response. We talk about intelligence. So on the phylogenetic scale, the consciousness is looked at, okay, where the intelligence is. So many times I've seen that in terms of the response that is given out, in terms of the intelligence, the consciousness is defined. Consciousness is also defined in this first group in terms of a state. Like you have the waking state, you have the dream state, coma is also a state. So you try to define, the people try to define consciousness in terms of a state or intelligence or behavior. The second group of definition is the one which is based on the phenomenology. Now, phenomenology is the first person experience. So it's like a subjective experience. So whenever there is an experience, there is going to be phenomenology. And wherever there is a phenomenology, there is consciousness. So any kind of subjective experience, first person experience whatsoever, that's consciousness. To understand this, let me share with you a very popular thought experiment. This is called Johnson's Marry. Some of you may have come across this thought experiment, but this would give you a clarity about what we mean by when we say a subjective experience whatsoever. So as per the thought experiment, just visualize, imagine there is this girl called Mary. Now she's in a room. Right from her birth, she's been in a room which is purely black and white. She has never seen colors. Everything inside that room is black and white for her. She's a neurobiologist, let's say extremely intelligent. She knows each and every aspect of the brain. Different neurons, neural correlates, everything she understands to the smallest thing about the brain. How the visualization happens, the visuals, how the visual cortex gets activated, the signals comes in through the eyes, rods and cones, how the signals gets carried. Okay, where in the brain it's happening, the seeing experience, she knows everything. One day, she steps out and sees a red rose. Is she going to experience something more? She knew everything before she stepped out, but she had never seen the color. So when she sees this red rose, so that additional first person experience, that when we see something, seeing is just one of the five sense organ. It could be related to hearing, it could be touch, it could be smell, it could be anything. But there is something more. It's like the first person, which is very personal experience that we get. That's consciousness. And that is the definition of consciousness that we're going to take on this journey. Not the first one, not related to a state, not related to a response, not related to a behavior, not related to an intelligence, but related to this first person subjective experience. And a beautiful equation comes in: any experience is consciousness plus object. Because behind every experience, as I said, there is a phenomenology, and wherever there is phenomenology, first person, there is consciousness. Now, this is also referred to as a phenomenal consciousness by Ned Blocks, who's a co-director with David Chalmers at NYU Center of Mind-Brain Consciousness. So he talks about two levels of consciousness, access and phenomenal. So at a very broad level, you can take this is what the phenomenal consciousness is. So we're going to talk about this first person experience. Now let me take back to the last evening discussion with the AI expert. Now consider this consciousness as the first person experience. Can the AI be conscious? So as per her, yes. Not today, maybe decades later, somewhere on the time scale, at one point the AI can become conscious, can have the first person experience. Now, just for the fun, let's just extend this thought process further, because there are quite a few AI experts who believe that AI can become conscious. Now, and I'm really going to stretch it here, so be with me. So if the machine AI can have a first person experience or can become conscious, they may also become self-conscious. They may have the experience of sadness, suffering, and then their search for bliss, transcendence of sorrow, or attainment of bliss, that may start. In other words, moksha, nirvana. So can AI be searching for nirvana? And if that is the case, then comes the karma and rebirth, karma theory, rebirth. Is AI going to have a rebirth? If all this is going to happen because the AI can become self-conscious, which tends to follow that if they become conscious, there's a possibility they may become self-conscious, then we as the creator of AI, what do we become? Think about it. Typical science fiction stuff, very similar to the famous story Isaac Asimov ki, The Last Question. Read that story if you guys haven't read it. I mean, it's a wonderful story. This talks about the reversal of entropy. A wonderful story to read. So it's got some sort of a connection to if AI become conscious. Now, the next question is, why should we bother about consciousness? What's the point? Why are we really going through all this grind of trying to figure out what this consciousness is, trying to define consciousness? Why? Because if you look at any of the big questions like what happens after death, how do we know anything? Who am I? Do we have a free will, morals, ethics, the God construct, the creation, purpose of life? Any of these big questions, they all are linked to consciousness. Whether ontological, beingness, or epistemic, how do we know anything? It's axiology, ethics, they all boils down to consciousness. Somewhere or the other, the connection comes to the consciousness. What is the problem? What's really going on in the field of consciousness? Many, many, many problems. Right from, as I said, the definition of consciousness, a very strong confusion between what is mind versus consciousness. So is the mind and consciousness are the synonyms? If you look at the Indian systems, the knowledge systems, mind is separate. Consciousness is different. So there is a lot of confusion in the basic definitions like the terminologies like mind and consciousness. But then apart from that, there are many problems, but I'm going to share with you two biggies here. Real big ones. First is the mind-body problem. What is this problem? So classic mind-body problem talks about how the processes at micro levels of synapses, neuron columns, neurons, cell assemblies, they cause this first-person experience. How can matter, which is not conscious, can give rise to consciousness? The first problem. Is consciousness an epiphenomenon? Is it reductive? If it is, how matter can give rise to consciousness? Because today, despite all the neural correlates of consciousness, trying to map the neurals, what's happening, the whole focus has been figuring out where, how it's happening, not in terms of the generation, causation of consciousness. So correlations, neural correlates, does not give the answer to the causation. It just gives a correlation. Correlation is not causation. If the material, the matter, the fundamentals, processes, those exist at the micro levels, if they genuinely can produce a consciousness, how? No answer. So David Chalmers, who actually coined this term, the hard problem of consciousness, so he's a philosopher from Australia. He coined this problem, the hard problem of consciousness. So we're going to talk David Chalmers. So whenever these discussions, global discussions of consciousness comes in, so this term, hard problem of consciousness, would feature again and again. So he sums it up. How does the water of the brain turn into the wine of consciousness? How this magic is happening? That's first major problem of the many problems. The second problem is, how does the consciousness or if these are the mental states, they act or affect the physical state or the matter of the brain? So you have something for now, I'm using these words very carefully. Let's say, and this is the popular scientific view, what I'm taking here. So in that popular scientific view, these two problems are there. So how this consciousness, and if these are the mental states, something which is consciousness can really affect the physical state. How's this interaction happening? Now, these two problems have been standing for decades. Now, today morning, I was actually seeing a video. There was this World Science Festival that recently happened in New York. And there was this conversation on consciousness. So the moderator was a gentleman called Brian Greene. Now he's an American physicist known for his research in string theory. So he's the professor of physics and mathematics at Columbia University. So his book, Until the End of Time, it's worth a read. Anyway, so he was the one who was the facilitator. And you have two participants there. David Chalmers, as I shared with you, he's the one who coined this term, hard problem of consciousness. So he's a cognitive scientist and a professor of philosophy and neuroscience at NYU. And he's also the co-director of the NYU Center for Mind, Brain, and Consciousness, along with NetBlocks. So David Chalmers was there, and you have Dr. Anil Seth. Dr. Anil Seth is a British neuroscientist, and he's the professor of cognitive and computational neuroscience. So he has written recently, I think a few months back, there was a book that he published called Being You, A New Science of Consciousness. So it's on the New York Times bestsellers list. Again, I would say worth a read. But anyway, so I was watching this conversation between Dr. Anil Seth and David Chalmers, facilitated by Brian Greene. is the same situation, same questions that I observed almost 15 years back when I got hooked on to this space of consciousness. Nothing has changed. Only the more confusion has come in. So why is this problem of consciousness not going away? I'm setting this ground before we take the Odyssey into the different concepts, different philosophies of consciousness, but I'm just giving you the current picture where we stand. Why this problem is not going away? So I'm going to give you two pointers here for you to consider. The first is the epistemic versus ontological confusion. Epistemic means knowingness, how you know something. And ontological means beingness. So knowingness versus beingness. Is the consciousness about knowingness, or is it an ontological approach? It is about beingness. If it is about knowingness, then you keep on doing more neuroscience. If that's what it is, the more we know about the brain, we will figure out consciousness. That means the focus is on how. And if it is ontological, it is beingness, then the focus is on what. And very few scientists go towards the direction of what, because science is primarily about how. Very reluctantly, the scientist would move towards what. Anyway, that's the first one. So in the first one, again, there would be very high focus on computational, informational approaches, measuring the level of consciousness. You have philosophy, you have concepts like IIT, integrated information systems technology there. So measurement of the phi, the global workspace theory. So integrated information theory, global workspace theory, high order theory, they all talks about measuring the levels of consciousness and figuring out where to stop in the phylogenetic scale. That's the epistemic versus ontological confusion. The second is the objective versus subjective. Is consciousness an object or a subject, which we call the category error problem? Anything that I can observe, I can see, is an object. But there has to be a seer to see. That's a subject. So what is consciousness? Is it an object or a subject? Big philosophical debate out here onto this. But let's say now, day by day, and this confusion on what is consciousness, it's increasing. Now see the level of confusion where we are today. In this publication I shared with you, Robert Kuhn's publication, A Landscape of Consciousness, he has given 10 major categories of consciousness theories. Not 10 theories, 10 major categories of theories, which consist of almost 200 theories of consciousnesses, which are there today. And he has not covered the whole. So he has taken some cutoffs, but despite creating a boundary, there are almost 200 theories in this paper. Starting from materialist theories, which are obviously is the maximum because that's the most popular approach, what the science takes, the materialistic approach. And we'll come down to very quickly on what are these, what is this materialistic approach. But anyway, so you have this materialism / physicalism approach, you have the quantum approach, you have the, as I said, the integrated information theory approach, panpsychism, monoism, dualism, idealism, a lot, a total chaos. So anybody who's interested, go through that. just for the sake of understanding the different approaches which are being considered in the field of consciousness. As I said, more than 200 theories. But for our purpose today, as I said, that we're going to have a very, very, very satellite view. Now we're going to talk about 4 possible approaches to consciousness. We're going to really make it simple here. What are the possibilities? The first possibility, now what is the question? We are talking about this first person experience, the phenomenological experience, the first person experience. How is that coming out? So what is the first possibility? First possibility is the matter produces consciousness. So consciousness is just an epiphenomenon. It's all matter, and matter somehow produces consciousness. So this view is called the materialism view, which, as I said, is taken by majority of the scientists today. Even in Indian knowledge system, I would say Charvakas would come very close to being the materialistic, one of the old materialistic. So that's one possibility, one end of the spectrum. Matter produces consciousness. The second end of the spectrum could be consciousness produces matter. Who takes this approach? All the religions in the world. God as the creator. God is consciousness. Obviously, God is not unconscious. He's very much conscious. He creates the world. He creates the matter. So any Abrahamic religion, theistic religion, they would say consciousness produces matter. Even where there is no God conception like Jainism, again, they would have a very strong theistic flavor of creation. Or replace God by mind. Mind produces consciousness. Subjective idealism, Bishop Berkeley. Or closer to home, you look at the Chinmatra school, Yogacharya school, Arya Sangha, Arya Vasubandhu, part of the Mahayana tradition. They talk about subjective idealism. That's the second possibility. What can be the third possibility? Neither produces the other. Both are fundamental. Matter and consciousness, both are fundamental. Dualistic approach. Closer home, Sankhya, Acharya Kapila Sankhya, Prakriti Purush. Even the Yoga school, where both are fundamental. Or there can be a fourth possibility, which is matter is just an appearance in consciousness. Idealism or monism. Vedantic approach, especially the Advait Vedantic approach, and to quite an extent, again, as I said, I'm using a very, very broad strokes here. So when we look at the Prasangika school or the Swatantrika school of Madhyamika, Arya Nagarjuna, Shunyavad, Acharya Chandrakirti, Lama Tsongkhapa, though they deny Atman, Atma, so Anatma, but then they talk about the conventional and ultimate truth, and somewhere sounding like the Vyavharika and Paramarthika level of Shankaracharya. Even Kashmir Shaivism is somewhere a lot of similarity with Advait, but they have a whiff of dualism with Prakash and Vimarsh concept. But anyway, the point being, 4 possibilities. On one side, you have matter producing consciousness. On the other extreme, consciousness producing matter. Third possibility, nobody is producing each other. Both are fundamental. And the fourth possibility, matter is just an appearance, an illusion in consciousness. So now let's just, again, not too deep, but let's just go through each of these 4 possibilities and see what's really happening. So let's start with the first one. Matter produces consciousness. Who takes this approach? It's primarily a neurobiological cognitive science approach, and most of the scientists would take this. So you got the big names like the Nobel laureate Gerald Edelman, he would be into this neurobiological approach. Francis Crick, Bernard Bass, the theoretical neurobiological, the global workspace theory, which states that the mental content become conscious when it gain access to a big workspace, the frontal and parietal region of the cortex. So the moment it gained access to these workspace, the mental content becomes conscious. Now there's another, which is the high order theory in this, which was given by I think it was David Rosenthal from Princeton. So he talks about mental content becoming conscious when there is a high level of cognitive process. So where the Bernard Bass theory, global workspace, talks about the spread, the quantity in a way, the high order theory, thought theory, talks about the quality. But they're all primarily a materialism, physicalism approach, which talks about that matter is the fundamental substance in the nature, and all things, including mental state, consciousness, they're all the result of material interaction of material things. Matter produces consciousness. Don't ask us how. We don't know the answer today. Give us time. We'll give you the answer, but there is nothing but matter. So nothing called some fluffy stuff or some stuff beyond matter. Everything can be reduced to matter. Now, what are the problem with this theory? One is obviously the problem of knowing it, in the sense that how it happens. But okay, for the minute, even if we say that it's on the time scale, maybe today we don't know, maybe we'll know it later. And this is very interesting. Do a Google. This is very interesting. There was this bet between David Chalmers that I mentioned earlier and Chris Koch. Chris Koch is a scientist at Paul Allen University, and so he's actually the author of this book called Confessions of a Romantic Reductionist. So Chris Koch is a neuroscientist at the Paul Allen Institute. So in 1998, so there was this conference that was happening. And a bet happens where David Chalmers was saying that there is no way materialism can explain consciousness. And Chris Koch, he was taking the view, no, it is possible. Give us 25 years. This is in 1998. Give us 25 years. In 25 years, we will show to you how matter is generating consciousness. And the bet was for a case of a fine wine. The winner will be given a case of fine wine by the loser. After 28 years in 2023, one of the person who actually had attended that conference, he said, what happened to that bet? So Chris Koch and David Chalmers, they came back together, and Chris Koch gave David Chalmers a wine case and asked for another 25 years. Give us another 25 years, we'll figure out how matter produces consciousness. It's called promissory materialism. But let's come back. That's one. So there are some other problems with the material approach. I'm going to give you 3 arguments here against materialism. The first talks about the explanatory argument, which states that just by explaining the structure and function cannot explain consciousness. Remember the how and what conundrum? How cannot explain what? Problem number 1. That's the explanatory argument. The second argument is the conceivability argument. is like a zombie problem, very famous, popular zombie problem. It's a version of a zombie problem. So what happens is, think about this. Follow this very carefully. So in our world, there are conscious experiences, right? Step one. Step two, there is a logically possible world physically identical to ours, in which the positive fact about consciousness in our world do not hold. I repeat, step one, in our world, there are conscious experiences. Step two, there is a logically possible world physically identical to ours, in which the positive fact about consciousness as in our world they do not hold. Logically possible. Step three, therefore, facts about consciousness are something more. There are further facts about our world, over and above the physical fact. Because we can logically possible, we can conceive such a world. If we can conceive such a world, which means these facts about consciousness are a further facts about our world, over and above the physical fact, which means materialism is false. There has to be something more than materialism. Think about it later. The third is the knowledge problem, the knowledge argument. Go back to the Mary problem, Jackson's Mary, what we talk about, the thought experiment. We can know all about the physical facts, but still that first person experience, we may be unable to know despite knowing all the facts till the time we experience it. Another big problem. For the sake of time, I thought I would not touch it, but I'll just share this with you. We talk about, but David Chalmers talk about the hard problem of consciousness. But actually there is a bigger problem, which is the hard problem of matter. You know, we are talking matter would generate consciousness, but there is a problem with the matter itself. And this term, hard problem of matter, was coined by Galen Strawson. So he's a physicist, he's a British analytical philosopher. Typically in his British humor, he said it's not a hard problem of consciousness, actually it's a hard problem of matter. We don't even know what is matter. And we are using matter to explain consciousness. Now think about it. We say matter. We initially thought these are these fundamental elements. Now, these five Panch Mahabhut that we talk about, the old cosmology. So you have the space, you have the air, you have the fire, you have the water, and you have the earth. Panch Mahabhut, jisko kehte hain. Okay, so we have this. Or let's say in today's word, you have these periodic table, the physical elements. So you have these elements. Now these elements are these what the reality is? Then we say, no. These are actually made up of molecules. Okay. So is molecule the ultimate reality of matter? Oh no. There is something called atoms. Okay. So is atom the ultimate reality of matter? We suddenly found out, no, there are subatomic particles. Protons, neutrons, electrons. Fair enough. Are these subatomic particles the reality of matter? To our dismay, no, there is something called quarks. Fair enough. Are the quarks really the reality of matter? No. We have reached now superstrings. And what are superstrings? They are only geometrical structures. So where is matter? You have the Nobel laureate Sir Roger Penrose. He and Tegmark, they talk about reality is essentially mathematics. Mathematics is the science of structure. And since we have reached the superstring, it's only geometry, it's only mathematics. The word is only a mathematical structure. It's all maths, it's all computational. Which Sir Roger Penrose talks about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. Okay, that's one. What is the second possibility? Second possibility is, so I'm going to come to the second one, which is none produces each other. Both are fundamental. Dualism. So what is happening in dualism? So there are two radically distinct parts, a physical brain, but apart from that, there is this non-physical substance that is not only independent of brain, but is also not of the physical world. That means there are two ontological categories, physical and non-physical. So whether substance, properties, aspect, dimensions, planes of existence, these are two different ontological categories. And now you have the different type of dualism. You have substance dualism, you have functional dualism, but then the main dualism that we're going to focus here is the property dualism, because this is what the most popular dualism is. There is this non-physical properties, and okay, so let me step back. So property dualism, we're going to talk about material dualism, not the property dualism. My mistake, because property dualism, the idea is that both the physical and non-physical comes out from the matter. Are you getting it? So a human person would have both a non-physical properties and a physical properties. But there would not be any non-physical parts. Because the moment you have a non-physical part, it becomes a different type of dualism, which is called the substance dualism. So in the, I didn't want to go into the functional dualism, but since I've touched base upon that. So very simple I repeat, in a property dualism, the properties are the different, but the source is still matter. So matter somehow gives rise to two different ontological realities having different properties. That's a property dualism. There are multiple challenges with property dualism, but surprising the desperation, today property dualism is making a huge comeback. But there are issues with there. We're not going to go that way, be too long. The second is the functional dualism, that it's about the function, but the main one I wanted to touch upon was the substance dualism. That means there are two different substances. There's a prakriti or purush sankhya mein hum baat karte hain. So there is this physical matter part, and there is something non-physical called soul. Generally, we refer it to the soul, or this substance dualism is also called the soul-centered dualism. Where you talk about the soul, almost many religions talk about this soul. Now, problem. What are the challenges with this Atma, Sharir, or let's say matter, soul? The first problem is physical world is supposed to be a causally closed system. So how can anything which is from outside can affect a closed system? Interaction problem. How matter and something like a soul, how the interaction between these two is happening, how this interaction is possible. Where is this interaction happening? René Descartes, from that time, you know, the Cartesian coordinates given by René Descartes. So at that time, he gave out this dualism, and he said, maybe there is this pineal gland where the interaction happens. Who knows? How do you verify? Another problem. It's not parsimonious. Two-word stuff seems very excessive. Then comes the Occam's razor. Occam's razor says that anything which is unnecessary, cut it out, because the explanation has to be very parsimonious, minimalistic. Why do you need this concept of two? Another problem, no knowledge. This soul is a very slippery thing. Are all the souls exactly the same? Like you have the electrons in the electron quantum field. Everyone gets an undifferentiated soul, or they are specially tailored to each individual. Who created the soul? Lots of questions that comes in. The point being that how do you verify? Testability problem. So this substance dualism more or less has fallen out of favor, I would say, in today's consciousness studies. Not that we have something very concrete out there, but this one is something which is not accepted by most of the consciousness studies domain. So we talked about two possibilities. One is matter producing consciousness. Second, matter and consciousness both are standalone, independent. And we've seen the problem. Very quickly, the last two, and I'll bring this to close. So I've already gone over time, but I'm just going to take another few minutes, cover these two, and then bring it together. Okay. Third one, consciousness produces matter. Two possibilities here, as I said. One is you bring in the ultimate creator, God, into the picture. Again, a challenge, because this divine creator concept is very less prominent. Same problem, testability. Because it becomes either a mystical experiences, which are personal experiences, people experiencing God. The challenge comes in. Testability nahi hai. The wall of God comes in. So you believe it, faith. But that doesn't cut ice any longer today in the consciousness study world. And again, if you look at the Indian knowledge system, we consider the upadan and nimit karan, the material and the efficient cause. So lots of different, I would say, approaches यहाँ पर आपको देखने में मिलेंगी. In terms of God as the cause, as the first cause, or as being transcendental, immanent, being the material and efficient, or maybe just being the efficient cause, not the material cause. And I hope you understand this material cause, efficient cause, upadan and nimit karan. Very quickly, think about it ki there is this potter. Who's making this pot? What it needs to make pot? There is a material which is needed, the clay, and there is an activity, someone to create the pot using the material. So material is the upadan, and the efficient cause, the effort, or let's say the process, the person who's doing it is the nimit karan. And you have different possibilities here. Like Advait would talk about Ishwar. What is the definition of Ishwar? You have the ultimate, which is called the Brahman, with Maya, the power of Brahman. That's Ishwar. So Ishwar becomes both the Upadan and the Nimit Karan for the creation. So different philosophies come. You go to the Nyaya school, Vaisheshika school, they'll talk about fundamental particles being there, but the God being the efficient cause. Okay, wherever the God comes in, even within Vedanta, you have the Dvait system, Madhava ji ka Dvait system, Shuddha Dvait, Vallabhacharya ji ka, Achinte Veda Ved, Chaitanya ji ka, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ji ka, even Vishishta Dvait, Ramanuj ji ka. There would be some sort of a God centric coming in as the ultimate creator. But always this problem of testability would come in. So let's say within this school, the second possibility is you have something called mind producing consciousness. Means, or mind producing matter, not consciousness, mind producing matter. So which means the mind is the creator and we are creating as we think. So creation is not outward inside, it's inside out. I repeat, we are talking about mind creating matter because mind is like consciousness and now consciousness is creating matter. So matter is whatever that you see outside is actually not there. We create as we think. So mind is real, word is false. And many of you would have guessed the problem with this. Again, a very sophisticated philosophy. If you study Vigyanvad, Chinmatra school of Madhyamika Buddhism, very, very detailed, intricate, I would say, philosophy. The metaphysics is बहुत strong. It is worth reading. So I am just skimming over this, but if you go deep into any of these metaphysics, any of these theory, it's not that they are not thought through, very detailed, thought through theories. Then some problems I would highlight. There are many problems which comes into the discussion of Vigyanvad, but I'm just going to touch base upon three problems, three arguments here against this theory, the popular ones. The first is, and what is the theory? Theory is that the mind is creating matter. Consciousness creates matter. What is consciousness? Mind. Mind is creating matter. The first problem is the problem of solipsism. So if object exists only as perceptions, follow this carefully. If objects exist only a perception in individual mind, how do different people can have a consistent experience of the same object? Second problem, continuity of object. Because as per this theory, it gives an indication then the object persist and maintain their properties when we perceive, because we create as we think. But there is a continuity of an object even when they are not being perceived. So tree remains there when no one is looking at it. So this stability of object being there. Now think about a dream. We create, the mind creates the dream. Let's say dream is a matter, object, mind is consciousness, consciousness created a dream. But there is no stability of objects in the dream. There's no continuity of objects in the dream. Third, testability, not possible. How do you test it? So on and so forth. There are quite a few arguments which are against the mind only, which again is now losing its, I would say, favor in the field of consciousness study. Berkeley's subjective idealism. Another possibility may be every subatomic particle has a bit of consciousness in it, has a seed of consciousness in it. This is called panpsychism. Think about it. So the problem is, it's not that matter is producing consciousness. It's not that consciousness is producing matter. It's not that matter and consciousness exist separately. It is that every subatomic particle has consciousness in it. This is panpsychism. Now the problem with panpsychism, if this is the case, the problem is called the combination problem. So how does these micro experience with each having its own consciousness aspect come together to form a macro experience? William James famously gave this example. Suppose 12 people are there. Each one is asked to pick one word. So think about it, 12 people, each one has picked one word. Now, if I mesh these 12 people together, will it give me a sentence? But panpsychism is making a huge comeback today. And even David Chalmers, in some sort of
Dr. Anish,
yeah, we
Dr.
are
Anish,
out of the time.
yeah, we are like 1 hour now. So we
I'll
should
just take 5
keep
minutes.
some
Is that
time
okay?
for, yeah.
I'll just take 5 minutes and close it and bring it to close. So we are done almost.
Yeah. Okay.
So the last one is where we talk about matter is nothing but an appearance in consciousness. This is where you have the Advaita Vedanta or the 5 major negations, neti neti. It's not a brain, it's not a mind, it's not an object. There are not many. It is non-dual. Consciousness only is. It's not that all is in it's not that everything is consciousness, that you have matter, consciousness, and everything is consciousness, but consciousness only is. Now, let me just bring it to the close. So where do we stand today? In the words of Ed Witten, who's an American mathematical and a theoretical physicist. So he was at the Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton, where you have Einstein, who studied that. I think Oppenheimer was also there. Gödel was there. So his words I'm going to quote now. He says, I believe consciousness is going to remain a mystery. As we study brain more, biologists and neuroscientists will learn more about the working of a brain. But why those workings are associated with the first person experience will remain a mystery. So maybe it is not about the search, as our Indian knowledge system says, either internal or external. Give up all the search, meditate, introspect, and the realization would all about that it's all about beingness and not becoming. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahm. But the jury is still out. The search continues. Thank you very much.
I So thank you, Dr. Anish, for this wonderful session. And I'm sure that there will be some questions. Then we can take a few questions. We have some time.
Sure.
So please raise your hands if you have a question.
I'm audible, sir?
Yes, you are. Go on.
Hello.
Say your
Sir,
name and then say the question, please.
so I'm Srijan, first year student here at IIT Roorkee. So I have two questions. One which is related to this session only, and other which is in a broader context for what GI4QC is doing, right? The first question is, we sort of ridiculed the idea of objective reduction while introspecting consciousness in this session, right? So, sir, have you heard the theory that Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff gave, orchestrated objective
Or
reduction?
theory you're talking about?
Sir, the one that Roger Penrose, this famous physicist, gave, the orchestrated objective reduction.
Or theory.
Yep. So, sir, in April of this very year, a paper came out which sort of proved their initial hypothesis that the collapse of microstates in these quantum microtubules can sort of simulate what our brain does. So we kind of solved two problems at once: the explanatory problem with objective reduction and also the problem of qualia. So there's that. And so what are your views on it? That's the first question. And then there's this second question, sort of related to what GI4QC is doing.
Sure.
So if you are going to take that way, that consciousness really is something non-physical, then obviously we have the problem of interaction. How is something that is non-physical interacting with some things that are physical?
Correct.
Right. And leading to that, we have, the answer to that really is that we have all these experiments, these global consciousness experiments, which prove that there is a relation between, people thinking at outcomes of random quantum number generators.
Sure.
The issue with that is any experiment without a theory is kind of meaningless, right? It's words without a narrative. And
Sure.
as far as I know, the only interpretation in quantum mechanics that supports this idea that consciousness can sort of affect physical things is the one that Wagner and von Neumann gave. That also sort of is devoid of credible empirical evidence.
Sure.
So why on one hand are we ignoring hardcore physical evidence, and the other hand we are embracing theories which have no physical evidence at all? Why this dualism?
Let me answer the first one, and then I'll come to the GI4QC one. Sure. So for the benefit of the audience, what is being referred to is one of a very there are two notorious theories in consciousness, I would say. One is the Tononi's integrated information theory, which is called the IIT, which actually is gaining more ground than the second one, which is the OR or orchestrated objective reduction theory. Now, this OR is a joint work of Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff. Stuart Hameroff was the anesthesiologist. So quantum conscious theories. Now, what they talk about now in a quantum theory, quantum mechanics, there is a collapse that happens, okay, where the wave then collapses and into the particle, and in some way the collapse needs to happen. So the quantum consciousness, we talk about that maybe this is that consciousness that talks about the collapse. So they talk about, they attributed consciousness to this quantum computational orchestrated or ORCH. So by electrical oscillation in tiny fractal pattern structures called the microtubules, which are within the neurons in the brain. And these could potentially sustain the quantum effects for a short period, just long enough so that the quantum computation can happen. Now, this is the theory that came out, and highly debated theory, quite a lot. This was first, I think, I don't remember the year when it came out, but I think just the time the book came out, The Emperor's New Mind and the Shadow of Mind by Roger Penrose, a lot has been said against the theory. The criticism is issued. So I'm not I would say an expert on quantum. Okay, but the one of the biggest criticism has been that the brain's unsuitability to host the quantum phenomena required by this theory, because it's considered to be very warm, wet, and noisy. How do you avoid decoherence? So there has been, OR has come into play, discussions happen, the criticism happens, the challenges are put up, theory goes into the back burner, comes out again. So today, if you look at the quantum theories which are there, theories which are based on quantum mechanics, most of the theories, rather all the theories actually, if you ask me, none of them have been proven till date. They are beautiful approaches, लेकिन अभी कोई भी अपने लॉजिकल कंक्लूजन पे नहीं पहुंचा है, whether it is IIT or OR. So you would have some other day coming in consciousness explained, computational, mathematical explanation or quantum explanation. Very soon it would come out, some other thoughts would come out, consciousness not explained. So as on date today, has OR been accepted totally, taken it by the scientific community? Not at all. Even Sir Roger Penrose can stand up and say, yeah, you know what, there are still work to be done here. A possibility. Is it a possibility? Very much a possibility. But is it a done deal? Not at all. Rather, IIT is gaining more popularity than OR. Is IIT a done deal? What is IIT? Just for the benefit of the participants. So there is this 5 value. So what it talks about, each and every aspect, let's say different parts coming together, when they come together, they produce something more than the individual. So that more extra is counted by this, calculated by this 5. Very complicated maths involved there. It's calculated by that. The more that 5 value is, the more the conscious the system is. Proven? Not at all. Possibility? These are some of the directions that today the studies are taken, whether it's the quantum based, or Quar, or there was some quantum eraser that came out at some time back, which got then again a lot of criticism for the quantum eraser. But anyway, so the point being that are these possibilities? These are some of the possible directions which are being taken, but nothing concrete on this. Same way GI4QC. See, what is GI4QC? GI4QC again is trying to share, it's the pointers, possibilities, potentialities. That's what it shows, that these are the possible ways that you can consider, look at it. Does GI4QC any of the, whether it's is the mind affecting the matter, is this a conclusive proof? No, not at all. But these are the possibilities that can be considered. Maybe in the future it turns out that mind actually affects matter in some manner, in some way. Possible, I don't know. It does not mean that we are trying to in any way lower the importance of materialism or science, or in any way. No, not at all. It's a question of when you're trying the different possibilities, you're exploring different avenues here to see that maybe one of the possibilities exist. Maybe there is a way, maybe you never know, panpsychism is actually possible. Or maybe actually the matter is just an appearance. Or maybe there is a way the matter is genuinely affected by the mind property dualism. Maybe property dualism, as I said, property dualism is coming back in the scientific community. Maybe there is matter which is producing two different ontological realities, one which is mind, the other which is matter. In that way, this interaction is possible. This influence is possible. So all what my suggestion, what my point here is that keep the thinking process going. Don't close it out, because today this is what is happening in scientific community. Different possibilities are being explored. Have we reached to a conclusion? As I said, the jury is still out. No. Long margin, no. But yes, the possibilities exist. Same way GI4QC, trying their best to share out these possibilities for the consideration. It's like planting a seed, that at least let's start thinking on these possibilities. Let's not have this narrow approach only of a materialism or an idealism or a monism or a panpsychism, or it's going to be quantum. Quantum is the big daddy now. Instead of Newtonian, everything is quantum. Be open to the possibility. And that's what GI4Q is all about, sharing these possibilities through different interventions, through different techniques. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think we can take one more question in the interest of time. So if anyone else has any question. Yes, there is one more question.
Go on.
Sir, thank you for the wonderful lecture. Myself, Rajiv. And I want to ask that in the current day theory of consciousness, how is the state of samadhi is explained there? And like, can we consider samadhi as the highest state of consciousness like that?
Okay. Very good question, I must say. See, samadhi as a state of consciousness, you're falling into the first definition of consciousness, where we talk about a state, not the first person experience, the phenomenological part, where we said the first is like a state. So you have a very high concentrated. So if you go to Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga, so you have the last three stages: dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, right? Dharana is concentration, dhyan, deeper concentration, samadhi, deepest concentration. It's a state which you come out of it. It's a state. Anything that can be attained, you can actually lose. You can lose it also. Which means samadhi is a state. Can you ever be out of consciousness? You can't. Because it is not a state. It's not something you can lose. I enter into the state of consciousness, I come out of the state of consciousness. That doesn't happen. Which is any of these higher states are something which is differs, the access consciousness. So that's one way of looking at it. But the actual phenomenal where the discussion happens today in the field of consciousness is on the first person experience, not in terms of a state or a behavior or a function. Keep that distinction in mind.
I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to you, sir, for laying out such heavy, complex context in such plain, beautiful words for the audience to understand. As we come to the close of this evening's session, I would like to express my gratitude to all those who made this possible, Professor Soham Chakrabarti and the students involved for coordinating this wonderful event, for you, Dr. Raheja, for sharing such groundbreaking insights, and lastly, to the audience, thank you for being such a wonderful audience. It has been a pleasure to be part of this thought-provoking session and has given us a lot to digest. We look forward to seeing you in the future for more such events by the Center of Indian Knowledge Systems. Thank you and have a great evening ahead.
Thank you.